Welcome back to the I Help Men Dress Better podcast, where this may come as a shocker to you. We help men dress better, not by focusing on the tactics of style, but more on the overall strategy. So, looking more at style from a framework lens. The framework that I use, and I'm working on things, as a business, always working on marketing. So, right now, um, working on it with this language. We're going to play around with this and see how this lands. But the idea of the canvas, so you as a canvas, the subject, so what you are, what's your story, what are you trying to communicate, and the audience, which is the context that you live in and the world that you function in. These are really the three, in my opinion, and from my years of experience figuring this out for myself, these are the three overarching buckets, the three overarching, over umbrella frameworks for really figuring out your style so that you are the center and the North Star and not, your friend group, your peer group. You're not chasing, you're not always trying to keep up with everybody else. You're not relying on other people's tastes. You're able to actually build your own taste and have a North Star to guide your intention, something to aim at, right? When I dress myself, I'm looking out into the world for pieces of clothing or ideas that interest me and excite me and that I feel overlap and align with my story, how I feel, what I want to express, what's acceptable in my life. But I'm at the center of that. I'm not looking out into the world for people to tell me what I should buy, to tell me what's going to look good on me, whether or not that's true. I know what's going to look good on me. I know what's going to be aligned. And I know that through a long process of trial and error, and also a lot of hard learned and hard earned lessons that the reason I have a company and my brand is so that I can help you, assuming you are a man looking to improve your style, so that I can help you do that in a shorter timeline and find a clear direction much, much faster than I did and avoid all of those miserable, miserable pitfalls. So, um, other language that I'm playing around with, and I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments, is I very much felt like an underdog in my earlier years, and style really helped me feel more like an icon or a role model. It really helped me feel like not like an underdog who was always chasing and, behind everybody else, trying to catch up, trying to play catch up. I think underdog is such a great metaphor because, right, the idea of like the dog chasing the car and they're never going to catch it versus being content and able to look inwards, right? You're the icon, you're the center, right? You're the center of the universe, and not in not in a better than thou way, but in a self-accepting way. You're not self-referencing because you're selfish. You're self-referencing because you're enough. And that's really, I think, at the core of my work. Obviously, I'm always playing around and figuring out the best message, the best way to communicate that to others. And of course, that's a big part of style as well, is teaching and learning the best way to communicate through clothing. So, yeah, once again, long welcome, but welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you joining me here and, using your time for this. I hope that you will walk away having learned something. Right before I filmed, I don't usually go into the podcast with like a very clear idea. I have an overarching theme that I try to fit things into, but I try to look for inspiration on what to talk about. And sometimes I'll sit down to record and I just don't feel anything. And I will look for inspiration and something will strike me. And today, recently, people have been telling me to walk. I have been an anxious ball of messy stress for the last few months, possibly even the last few years. Running your own business, it's very stressful. And people have been telling me to go take walks for my nervous system for years. And I finally got hit over the head enough times that I have started taking short walks recently. And they were right. And I hate that they were right, because if they're right, then that means I was incredibly stupid every time I didn't listen. Not true. Not true. That's my judgmental side. That's my judgmental side. I needed to go through the process to get to this place. And I'm so glad that I went through that process, because it has solidified how miserable I was before as a really good point of reference for how much better I feel now. Just taking, I try to take a minimum of a 20-minute walk. When I can, I try to do 2. I'd love to aim for 3. That's kind of my goal right now, but it feels so much better. Now we just have to pray that I can maintain this when the weather gets really bad here in Chicago, because it will definitely snow. But on my walk, I started watching one video that gave me like a great epiphany. Actually, that the idea of the word underdog, which I think is a word that I've been looking for the last like 3 years. Sometimes there's a word that so perfectly sums up an idea that you've been thinking of for a long time, and it just doesn't get to you until it's the right time. And so I'm hoping that now is the right time. I'm hoping this is a good sign that now is the right time, because that word underdog came into my inspiration lexicon right before this podcast, and that was exciting for me. And the other thing is, I just watched a video about another idea that I've seen spoken about by people who really inspire me, and this was from a different creator, and it just reinforced for me that this is an important idea. So we're going to focus on the second video, but I think that the underdog idea will come back into it. So the idea in the video was that men really, really want to hide, that we don't want to be noticed. And his video was about why he thinks that is. I'll try to link that if I remember. I'll try to link that video if I can, in the show notes or something, because I think it was a great video. He seems like a really nice creator. I haven't watched a lot of his content, but I did like what he had to say. I thought it was very well thought out. And I see this in my own life, this idea of wanting to fit in. And I think that was a big part of my story early on. When I was younger, I really, really, really wanted to fit in. Like I wanted people to like me. I wanted to have friends. I wanted making friends to feel as easy as it seems like it felt to other people. Right? It was like I had a lot of challenges in elementary school, but I think high school was where I really started to move on a path to try to get out of that cycle, because it got much worse. It was much worse, and I always feel a little bit silly. I'm 32 years old. I'm married. I have children, and coming back and harping on my high school experience always has started to feel a little bit silly. But it's really not about me. It's really about the journey that it took to get here. And recently, I've been fortunate to have a lot of epiphanies of things that have really helped me get through like blockages in my current life. So I do think that while it sometimes feels a little silly to harp so much on the past and spend so much of my mental time picking apart, my high school years, I do think that there's a lot that I've been able to apply to my life now, with the new tools that I have, that I've gained through my, I would say, style journey. But to me, I think style is more the catalyst of all of the big changes and growth that I've experienced in my life. So, which is why I feel like it's so important. But he was speaking about how men really want to be normal. They want to be viewed as normal. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to, be singled out. And he told this story of his friend who really generally didn't dress very well. And he wore this one jacket that this guy noticed and really liked. And then he noticed he never wore it again. And he went and he asked and he said, like, why'd you stop wearing this jacket? And he's like, yeah, somebody noticed and it made me uncomfortable. And it it just struck something in me because I think there was a time in my life when that really was my experience. I think I would have interpreted any noticing that wasn't very, very explicitly a compliment. I would have interpreted that as some sort of criticism. I would have felt uncomfortable, and I actually do to this day feel uncomfortable when I get actual compliments. So I relate to that experience, right? If discomfort means bad to you and anyone noticing you, anybody noticing a piece of clothing that you wore, whether it's negative, an insult, or positive, a compliment, if that feels uncomfortable in your body, regardless of whether it's positive or negative, you're going to experience that as negative, and it's going to, if you haven't trained yourself to, accept discomfort and lean into discomfort, then you're going to say alarm bells are going to go off, and you're like what happened with this guy where he never wanted to wear that jacket again. And I immediately put in my notes because I like to take notes so I can remember, what I want to talk about at different times. It reminded me of something that Tanner Guzzi wrote about, and Tanner is somebody who has really inspired me and the way that I think about style. My archetypes are I spoke to Tanner in the past, and he I said, I think your archetypes are perfect, and I wouldn't change a thing. Can I use them? And he gave me explicit permission on a call. But I have since made some adjustments. But it reminded me of something that he wrote in one of his newsletters. And it was about how men really try to hide in two ways. And, one of them is like this guy, where you don't wear anything that stands out and you sort of try to fade into the background. And the other way is where you actually wear really bold and loud clothing. You wear head to toe colors. You really ramp it up to you ramp it up to 100, and that is its own sort of hiding where I don't want you to see me. I don't want you to see my face. I don't want you to see my body. I don't want you to see my personality. I want you to kind of view this big colorful mask, right? I want you to notice my clothes. I don't want you to notice me. And a big part of and that's not always necessarily a bad thing. I think it's like anything, it can be in moderation. There are a lot of times when I wake up and that's the kind of day that I want to have. I want to have the kind of day where I'm dressing really loud and bold, and I don't care if me and my humanity and my personhood is the center. But a lot of times I do try to tailor my clothing to put me at the forefront, because my clothing should serve me and your clothing should serve you. And that's a big thing that I work on with my clients, is how to make sure that they are the center and they are the focus. And yeah, I mean, that video just really struck that chord with me, and I wanted to talk about it today. This idea of men really wanting to hide, because a lot of people think that my ideal client is their younger brother, their brother, whatever, who is locked in his basement and never sees the light of day and has no hygiene and care, and they tell me, oh yeah, men really need that. And I have not found that to be a demographic that wants my help. I've found that the demographic of people that value my service and want what I have to offer are, bringing it back in, more of the underdogs, the people who really felt like an underdog in their past. And through breaking out of their perceived chains, right, through being able to accept their flaws and own them as powers and abilities, they've been able to achieve more of a role model or icon place. And if you relate to this, you're my people, welcome. But a lot of the guys that I talk to and that I've worked with have had a similar life story where they've made this transition, and I think they see the value in no longer dressing like that underdog, right? No longer letting that person represent who they are when they walk into a room. They want to make sure that they can bring this evolved version of themselves to the forefront and stop hiding. Because whether you feel like an underdog or not, I think a lot of guys, they want to hide, they want that safety, they don't want to push themselves out of their comfort zone. And I think the superpower and the gift of being the underdog, of having a challenge in your youth that you could not escape from, or maybe this is hitting you later in life, but having a challenge that you cannot look away from, it forces you to go down this path and make the changes that you need to make and to transform into this new person and to realize that you can metamorphose and become somebody new. Um, I'm so used to being myself that I'm always tickled when people are surprised that I was very, very different in my younger years. In some ways, very much the same, but in some ways, very, very different, especially internally. And yeah, if you are someone who's hiding, I just want to say that negative feeling does not have to be bad. And if you can lean into your discomfort and you can set yourself apart, you really can make the life that you want a reality. You're going to have to work for it, but it is very possible. And I say this from experience. And to anyone who has gone through this transformation and they don't know how to get away from dressing like the underdog, they just don't know how to dress without chasing trends or looking to the outside world or asking their spouse, looking outside of themselves for the North Star of how to dress. For any of you who want to become your own North Star, definitely hit me up. Check me out on LinkedIn. It's the best place to find me, and we can talk about opportunities to work with me. What's cooking, what's available right now, and definitely check out my content on LinkedIn. Shlomo Hamnick. My banner is navy right now, navy blue, but my profile picture has a pretty bright reddish pink. Can't miss it. I am on Instagram at, I believe it's Style X Philosophy or Dress Like Yourself Man. It's Dress Like Yourself Man. I'm on Instagram at Dress Like Yourself Man. I do not post there very often. I am on Reddit. I don't remember my but if you like this podcast, if you like this episode, or if you kind of like this episode and you want to check out some other ones to see if maybe you like those better, please do that. And, like, share, subscribe. If you learned something, if you gained something, if this reminded you of someone you know, please share it. Please forward it, pass it on. It would really help me, and hopefully it helps you, and hopefully it really helps them. So once again, I know there's a lot you could be doing with your time, and I really appreciate that you spent it with me. And I will see you next week. Take care.